is NALU, Gamma, and the 1997 MDRT meeting. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to Anthony Gailey.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It is a thrill and a pleasure to be here at the MDRT for my second appearance. I'd like to start out today talking a little bit about the internet technology and the change of the millennium. I've heard a lot of the speakers going through here and some of the main platform presentations. It seems to be a hot topic here. I'd like to give you my 2 cents worth of what I think is going to happen to your industry and what's going to happen to you individuals as agents and reps. And here's my take. I think it could go either way. Let me explain. Had an interesting experience a few months ago. I got invited by the International Gamma Association to speak in Singapore. And I had never been out to the Far East before, and it was really interesting and exciting. I believe the future is happening in the Far East right now. And it was just a glimpse of what's coming our way, and it was really kind of interesting. To give you a rundown, turns out 7 out of 10 folks in Singapore own a cell phone. The cost of cell phone calls are so inexpensive over there that 7 out of 10 use the telephone as a true personal communication tool. On more than one occasion, when I was over there speaking at the conference, I would be talking to someone, their cell phone would go off, they would answer the phone, talk for a few minutes, and then they'd turn around and they'd say, okay, I'll be right there. These folks call across the room to each other. I'm not kidding, and I saw that on more than one occasion. The cost to make a cell phone over there is so low that they use it at the blink of an eye without even thinking about it, and currently over 7 out of 10 of those folks have a cell phone. That change is coming to these shores probably within the next 3 to 5 years. If you've been watching and reading the news, you've seen that already a lot of the major telephone companies have lowered and lowered and lowered the rates for cell phone, and they will keep going lower, and at some point people are going to recognize and realize, you know, it is cheaper for me to carry around and use this cell phone than it is for me to use a wired telephone. And the day that happens, which will be in the very near future, that will revolutionize your business. Think of what it would be like to be instantly accessible to your clients anytime, any place, or more to the point, think of how it's going to be when they are instantly accessible virtually anytime and any place. Those changes are coming. Here's another change I saw over there. Everyone uses the internet over there. We went to some of the older sections of town. We went into a number of the small shops and stores. Every little store we went into had a computer terminal on the internet. You see, they wired their entire island a few years ago with fiber optics. They currently run over there at 270,000 BPS. They hit a web page and it's almost instantaneous access. Those changes are coming to these shores as we speak. Right now, the cable companies are opening all kinds of markets where they're having cable access. We will eventually wire this country for fiber optics. The only reason it hasn't happened already is that we are a much larger country and we are married to the copper wire currently. That will change. Think of how that will affect your business. Think of how it will be when your clients can hit the internet and shop around. Or more to the point, when you can sit in a client's living room and give them instantaneous information about their account balances, about what where their stocks and bonds are performing, about what their cost will be for an app or a policy. These changes are coming, mark my word, and here's the kind of interesting split. I've talked to a number of agents and reps about this, and I get almost a schizophrenic response. Some people say, this is terrific. I can't wait till it happens. You mean I'm going to be able to call my clients almost any place they are? Do you mean I'm going to be able to hit the net and have instantaneous access to all that information? Can't wait for it to happen. And then I talk to other people, this is going to be a disaster for us. This is going to wipe our industry out. It's kind of interesting, dichotomous points of view. And here's what I say, both things will happen. Both things will happen. The people that see the future clearly latch onto it and focus on it. The people that are focused with their goals are going to thrive in the coming years, and the people that stay in the past, that refuse to move into the 21st century, that stay married to the old technologies, will probably wither and die like buggy whips. Now, what do you choose? See, I think ultimately the statement, quite clear, is that the choice is yours. The choice is yours. Now, if you choose to move into the future, I believe you need focus, and I believe you need vision. And that's what I'd like to talk to you all about this afternoon, focusing on the 21st century. I teach this program all over the country. I've been doing it for about 20 years, and I'm in a really neat position. You folks would have no way of knowing this, but last year I gave over 200 presentations. As I mentioned, I got to go to Singapore. I spoke at the NALU convention. I got to speak, to a number of home office insurance groups, and it was really kind of interesting because I attended well over 200 conventions last year, and I get to see who wins the awards. I get to see who's brought up on stage as the agent of the year, the rep of the year, the #1 moneymaker. I spoke just last week to the Leaders Club of the Guardian Insurance Company. I get to meet the top producers in this industry almost on a daily basis, and I have come to some conclusions. I admit that I'm biased, but I believe most of the top achievers I've met in your industry are programming themselves. They are doing something usually on a daily basis to get and stay focused on their futures. Now, the good news is they're not all doing the same thing, not by any stretch of the imagination. I've interviewed hundreds of top achievers, and I've gotten hundreds of different answers as to what people do to get and stay motivated. But here's some of the more common things I've heard out there. Met a person not too long ago in your business, did $4 million in premium last year. $4 million in premium. Young guy, 31 years old. Asked him what he did to stay motivated. He didn't blink an eye. He said, I write my goals down 3 times a week. So what are you talking about? He said, well, I found for me at least that if I couldn't see it, if it wasn't in writing, if it wasn't right there, I would lose my focus. So a couple years ago, I got myself in this habit. I keep a yellow notepad on my desk. 2 or 3 times a week, I'll grab that yellow notepad and rewrite my business goals. He said, I have some very clear-cut targets I'm out there trying to hit. I know what my daily goals are. I need to see 5 people a day face-to-face. I know what my quarterly goals are. I know where I want to be by the middle of the year. I know where I want to be by the end of the year. And all I found, he said, is that if I don't write it down, I lose it. By my definition, writing your goals down on a piece of paper 3 times a week is an example of programming yourself. Because let's face it, folks, motivation doesn't last very long. You can spend a week at MDRT, hear some great speakers, interact with some amazing producers, come out of these conferences focused, fired up, and motivated. How long does that last? A lot of people go back a week later, they've drifted back to their old levels of production. Yet every once in a while, you run into a person that truly has the gift. I mean, they really seem to be fired up and motivated all the time. Those people, mark my words, those people program themselves. You are not going to wake up one morning spontaneously and be goal-oriented. You need to develop it. And writing your goals down 3 times a week is an excellent example of doing that. Now, I'm sure I'm not the first person that's mentioned that to you. You probably all have heard about writing your goals down 3 times a week. Am I right? How many of you actually do it? 1, 2, 3, 4 people out of about 400, right? I'll tell you why you don't do it. It's boring as heck. People say, I tried that, it was just too boring. Another person said, I'm too busy, I'm out in the field all the time. I'm out there doing appointments. I can't be writing my goals down 3 times a week. Another person once said to me, yeah, I tried to do that. Every time I went to do that, I couldn't find a pen or a pencil. Goofy things keep people from getting and staying motivated. Met a woman not too long ago, agent of the year in her company, phenomenally motivated individual. I asked her what she did to stay motivated. She didn't blink an eye. She said, I listen to motivational tapes every day on the way into work. I said, what do you mean? You know those inspirational, those sales tapes you can buy? Keep a stack of them in my glove compartment. I used to listen to Howard Stern. That was bumming me out. So I started listening to motivational tapes. Every day on the way into work, I grabbed one, pop it into the tape player. She says, I know that sounds corny, but for me, it works. By the time I get to an appointment or by the time I get to the office, she said, I'm thinking positive thoughts in the back of my head. I'm a little bit more enthusiastic. Sometimes I'll blow in there. I'll make a sale because of my enthusiasm. I think listening to motivational tapes every day is an example of programming yourself. Someone else said that for them it was the Bible. And I said, what do you mean? I read the Bible every night before I go to bed. It inspires me, motivates me, keeps me on the straight and narrow. That's all I need to stay focused. I got to tell you, I think that is an example of programming yourself as well. I believe there are a lot of ways you can do it. And I will assume that you folks wouldn't be sitting here at MDRT unless you are doing something to motivate yourselves. But I'd like to give you a little bit more today. See, I admit that I'm biased, but I also believe top achievers are hypnotizing themselves. They don't call it that. They call it their quiet time, their visualization process, their autogenic training. But if you analyze what these top achievers are doing, they are deliberately putting themselves into a hypnotic state on a regular basis and internalizing their goals. Please don't let the word scare you. The word hypnosis scares people. Don't let it. I happen to believe the average person in this room is already spending about 70% of their waking day in a trance anyhow. In the next few moments, we're just going to put it to some good use. That's a bold statement. Let me explain. A lot of people say, 70% of my day in a trance, that sounds fantastic. No, it's true. It's true. Have you ever driven past your exit on a freeway, pulled into the driveway at the end of the day, and then seriously had to sit there and ask yourself, how did I get here? You know, was that light red? Did I stop at that stop? Well, where were you then? I think you were in a trance when you were doing that. I'll give you another example. You ever seen a member of your family tranced out in front of a TV program or a computer screen and you call them for dinner and they don't hear you call their name? Also an excellent example of a trance. I'll give you another one. Have you ever daydreamed? More to the point. Have you ever seen someone daydreaming? You ever looked over, one of your cohorts in the office is doing this number? You know, that look where they're just out there in the middle of nowhere? That is an example of a trance. And if you start watching people, just watch people in the course of normal conversation, you'll begin to recognize that most people really do spend most of their lives in a trance. They drift out, they come back again, they drift in, they come back again. Most of us spend most of our lives thinking about what we should have done, could have done, might have done, or what we think we're going to do, what we hope we're going to do, and we actually spend very little time paying attention to what we are doing. Now, I speak at a lot of conferences, and not too long ago after a conference, an interesting gentleman came up, he shook my hand, and he said, you know that thing about drifting in and out of trances? Good point. He said, I never noticed that before, but once you brought it to my attention, I guess I have to admit I do spend a lot of time doing that. And I said, well, thank you. He said, yeah, but so what? I said, what do you mean? So what? What do I care that I spend 70% of my day in a trance? I had a good year in 98. 98, 99 is shaping up just fine. Why do I even care? Here's why I think you ought to care, folks. It turns out when you go into a trance, two interesting things happen. The first is that you tend to become more suggestible. Ever seen a number of people tranced out in front of a TV program? One person in the room yawns, what happens? Everybody starts yawning. The suggestion to yawn goes right into the person's subconscious mind. They're doing it before they've analyzed it or criticized it. Rest assured that television advertisers spend billions a year, billions, deliberately trying to get you into a trance-like state. And I'll tell you how they do it. They do it with colorful pictures, catchy tunes, sexy women, great-looking guys, anything that fixates your attention long enough to bury a subconscious message. I had a gentleman not too long ago, it's kind of interesting, he was talking about drifting in and out of a trance. He said he had driven 150 miles out of his way. He said he had gotten into a car in New York and snapped out of it in Connecticut. He said, I got so wrapped up in what I was doing that I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. When you go into a trance, you tend to become very, very suggestible. Second thing that happens, you tend to become very automatic with respect to your behavior. Very robot-like. Give you some examples. Highway hypnosis. Once again, an excellent example. You get behind the wheel of a car. At the end of the day, you go out into the parking lot, you put the car in the key in the ignition. You're tired. You tell your unconscious mind, home. And then you go away for a while. It's true. You see these people driving down the highway, it's scary. I mean, you can tell they have no idea what they're doing. You drive unconsciously until you snap out of your trance. That's what happened to that guy. He got in his car, got so wrapped up in a problem he was dealing with, wasn't even aware of what he was doing. Give you another example. Overeaters spend an awful lot of time in trances. Sometimes an overeater goes, gets a bag of potato chips or a box of pretzels or something, and they sit down in front of the TV set, and they tell the unconscious mind to eat. And then they go away for a while. They get more and more absorbed in that program. You can see them, they look like little robots over and over again. Turns out your unconscious mind will do exactly what you tell it to do. You tell it to eat, it'll keep eating until you tell it to do something else, until you snap out of your trance. While the overeater sits there in a trance, over and over, eating the potato chips, they keep doing it until they snap out. Unfortunately, what snaps them out of their trance? Yeah, they reach down, the bag is empty. That's what brings them to. And then they have that moment, I can't believe I just did that again. Here's what fascinates me. They would have never allowed themselves to do it if they were conscious of their behavior. In other words, had you taken the potato chips, poured them into a bowl, hand them to the person and said, here, eat all the potato chips. Go ahead, I want you to eat the whole bowl. Go ahead. If they tried to do it, they would be stuffed halfway through the bowl. But when one part isn't paying attention to what the other part's doing, you'll do whatever you're programmed to do, even if it's a self-destructive behavior. I believe smoking is an excellent example of that. Every once in a while, a smoker goes into a bar and buys a pack of cigarettes. Now they have a couple drinks. They dulled their senses a little bit. They're in a dimly lit atmosphere. They start chain smoking, one right after the other, as they get themselves more and more absorbed in these really stupid conversations. You ever see some of the conversations people have in bars? One right after the other. They're not paying attention to what they're doing. Well, an hour goes by, 2 hours go by. After 2 hours, the person reaches down for a cigarette, notices the pack is empty. That's what snaps them out of it. And then they have that magic moment, could I really have smoked them all? Didn't I just buy these a couple hours ago? Has someone been taking my cigarettes? I mean, did I smoke that whole pack? This, again, fascinates me. had you taken the cigarettes, handed them to the person and said, here, smoke them all. I want you to smoke the whole pack. Go ahead, I'll give you 2 hours. I will give you $100 if you can smoke them all in 2 hours. Go ahead and try. If that person tried to do it, you would probably have to take them to the hospital. They would be sick halfway through the pack. But when one part isn't paying attention to what the other part's doing, you do whatever you are programmed to do. Now, here's how that relates to you in a very powerful way. I deal with an awful lot of salespeople. And time and again, I see people that are programmed to be mediocre. Once again, obviously, you don't qualify or you wouldn't be here. But not too long ago, I spoke at an insurance group. A young sales manager came up to me and he pointed to a guy in the audience and said, see that guy out there? I recruited him 2 years ago. He is the best natural salesperson I have ever recruited. I said, well, what makes you say that? This kid's just got the gift of gab. People like to deal with him. He's got great product knowledge. He's always enthusiastic. He's a great salesperson. I said, well, got to be making a lot of money, right? He said, actually, he made about $40,000 last year. I said, well, doesn't seem like a whole lot to me. He said, well, it's not. I said, why? He said, I'll tell you why. He thinks $40,000 is a lot of money. I said, what are you talking about? Well, his spouse works. They put their income together. Together, they're making about $75,000. He's young. He thinks he's on easy street. Now, on more than one occasion, I've sat down with him and said, hey, raise the bar. Do something. Qualify for MDRT next year. You know, or hey, why don't you, you could have made $100,000 last year if you really wanted to. Come on, you can do it. Every time I have this talk with him, a week later, he's back to where he was. He's focused on making $40,000 a year. Now, analyze this. You folks are out there in the field doing this. You tell me if I'm right or not. A salesperson who's focused on making $40,000 a year has a great first quarter. They fire out of the gate, and in the first quarter, they've already made $20,000. But they're focused on making $40,000 a year. What do they do for the next 3 quarters? Golf, coast, hang out, whatever it takes. You know, what do they end up with at the end of the year? The reverse is also true. This person has a terrible first 3 quarters. Everything falls apart. Everything goes wrong. At the end of 3 quarters, they've only made 20. What does that person who's focused on 40 do in the last quarter? They will be working 80-hour weeks. They'll be asking for referrals like a son of a gun. They'll be pulling sales out of thin air. What do they end up with at the end of the year? I'm going to make a bold statement. You folks are doing it. You tell me if I'm right or not. I think most of you have already made up your minds how much money you're going to make this year. It's already sitting in the back of your head. And every time you make an appointment, every time you meet for a breakfast or lunch meeting with a client, every time you send out those mailers, there's a little cash register that goes off in the back of your head. You see yourself getting too close to your goal, you go golfing. You see yourself not close enough, you start staying late at the office. There's a little center of attention back there, a little focus, and guess what? That has nothing to do with interest rates, with mergers, with technology, with stock markets. It's 99% to do with what's going on up here. 99%. You think you're top of the table material, you'll go out there and do whatever it takes to make top of the table. And if you can't see yourself making top of the table, no matter what the economy does, you're not going to make it until you can see it. You got to be able to see it. And that's what I believe top achievers do. That's why I say that I believe most top achievers are hypnotizing themselves. Listen to them. They're telling you how they do it. You ever hear these true success stories in this business? I started out 5 years ago in this business and never sold a thing in my life. You know, my brother had recruited me into the business. When I first started, I didn't have that much of an education, didn't have any advantages or anything. You know what I had? They'll say I had a vision. I had a dream. I could see myself doing well. I remember all I could afford was this beat-up old car, but I used to cut out pictures of Mercedes, tape them up on the dashboard. See the Mercedes out there in the parking lot? I always knew I was going to drive that car. My spouse and I, we used to fantasize about what kind of home we were going to get once we got successful. I mean, we used to sit around and talk about, how many pillars we're going to put out front. We're going to put the swimming pool and the tennis court. See the big, beautiful home out there? I mean, it's just the way we saw it in our minds. Listen to these people. They're telling you what they're doing. Olympic athletes do the same thing, folks. How many of these downhill skiers do you see doing this before they go out there and try to compete? They know you got to be able to see it. I've talked to some folks here, and I've had a couple of people just at this conference say, my goal is to be quarter to table next year, and I came like within 30,000 or 20,000 of doing it. I tried to do it, but I fell short this year. And I asked them, well, did you have a clear picture of it? Did you know exactly what it is you want? Well, not really. Well, I say you're not going to be court or top of the table until you can see it. And that's where hypnosis comes in. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you in a few moments. You're probably wondering what these chairs are doing up here. In just a few moments, I'm going to bring a number of you up out of the audience and literally hypnotize you. But before I do that, I have a couple of promises to make.